She didn't believe me anyway.
Probably didn't tell it right.
That must be it.
Nancy and Jonathan finally connect and Max gets her proof. Let's break down Chapter 6 of Stranger Things Season 2 right now on what happened. How's it going, you lovely people? Lisa here, and welcome back to my Stranger Things recaps. Today it is all about episode 6 titled The Spy, which is of course a reference to the previous episode when Mike said Will could act like a spy for them when it comes to the Shadow Monster's plans. But does it actually work? It might backfire a little bit more, but more on that in a second. Now this episode is an 11-free episode, but her presence is still felt as we get a scene of Hopper on his car radio finally giving the apology he just couldn't get out before, pouring his heart out over the radio, but sadly it's to an empty house and he has no idea yet that 11 is no longer there. As for Max, she bonds with Lucas and we learn that her parents divorced and her dad stayed in California while her mom and stepdad decided to get a new start in Hawkins of all places. Now she reveals that Billy has always been a dick, but now on top of that he's angry all the time, so he takes out all his anger on her. And that's part of why she ends up being kind of angry towards the boys at times, and she really doesn't want to turn out like Billy, and I kind of don't think you have anything to worry about there, Max. Next up, Jonathan and Nancy are still hanging out with Murray and they've made copies of the tape to send to all the big newspapers. To celebrate, they drink a little bit too much of Murray's Russian vodka to drive home, so he offers them his guest room. When Jonathan asks if he can have the sofa, Murray turns into the love doctor, seeing right through all their bullshit about just being friends.
That is the first lie.
It's not a lie.
No, you're young, attractive, you've got chemistry, history, plus the real shared trauma.
Nancy and Jonathan end up taking separate rooms, but both can't sleep thinking about Murray's words, and eventually it all plays out and Jonathan goes to Nancy's door. They kiss and then spend the night together, and by morning time they're smiling at each other while eating Murray's cooked breakfast. Murray gives them a bottle of vodka and seltzer for the road and tells them to keep their eyes on the paper, and then he says, "If you need to reach me again, don't," and slams the door. Yeah, that Murray is a weird one. When Jonathan and Nancy return to his house, they see the house covered in all Will's drawings, and Jonathan finds an empty Polaroid cartridge, so he knows someone has been there. Moving on to the buddy pair you never knew you wanted, but we needed. Dustin brings Steve over in order to go into the cellar because he's a little too scared to check on Dart. They both end up going down and they see that Dart once again has shed his skin, but he's also dug himself a tunnel to escape. Thanks to Lucas's bratty but funny little sister Erica, Lucas realizes Dustin's been trying to call him the whole previous day about a code red, so he finally calls Dustin back. Now Dustin and Steve are packing up a bunch of meat into his car, and Dustin tells Lucas he thinks the Dart is a baby Demogorgon, and he tells Lucas where to meet them. Lucas sees this as an opportunity to prove to Max that he isn't lying about the whole story, so he braves going over to her house where Billy is working out, giving off major Brand vibes. That's a Goonies reference again, guys. I love the Goonies, by the way. Max sneaks out the back of the house and rides with Lucas on his bike. Meanwhile, Dustin and Steve are walking along the train tracks, leaving a trail of meat for Dart. Steve gives Dustin some big brother advice when it comes to girls, and you know, they're bonding when Steve even gives up the secret of his hair.
It's Fabergé Organics. Use the shampoo and the conditioner, and when your hair is damp, it's not wet, okay, when it's damp, you do 4 puffs of the Farrah Fawcett spray.
Well, that explains why it's always so voluminous, right? The two make their way to the old junkyard where they meet up with Max and Lucas. Now Dustin is like, why is Max here? And Lucas has to explain that he told her everything, and they kind of squabble a little bit, but they end up working through it. The group then work together to build a trap for Dart. They barricade themselves in an old school bus and make a trail of lighter fluid that goes out to a big pile of meat in the center, so if Dart comes to the meat, they can light it from the bus and hopefully burn him. Once nightfall comes, they finally hear Dart and he isn't taking the bait, so Steve shows that he's got some big cojones and grabs his bat and heads to the pile of meat to offer Dart some variety in his dinner. Well, as expected, it turns out pretty bad, and there actually are more than one little Dart running around. Some are little, some are big, and as they close in on Steve, he manages to make it back to the bus. Now, just as it seems like one of the Darts is about to jump in through the top of the bus, something happens and they all retreat. And Steve realizes that they're all going somewhere. So where are they going? Well, that all ties into Will's storyline. Also here, there's a little handhold moment for Lucas and Max, which I don't think Dustin is a fan of. I hate to say, actually I take that back, I don't hate to say it, I freaking love this relationship between Steve and Dustin. I am so happy that Steve didn't resort back to the jerk that he was in season 1, because after he got his heart broken, that could have been the easy route to go. Instead, they've made him evolve. He's become the cool big brother mentor, and I think it's really awesome for him. And watching him pretty much sacrifice himself, or almost sacrifice himself for these kids, yeah, he might have the best arc so far in my opinion. Now for Will. He's wheeled into Hawkins' lab and he's burning up everywhere and he says it hurts everywhere. Meanwhile, Hopper ends up getting a power wash. The people from the lab make their way to the Byers' house to take pictures of everything, and when Joyce expresses to Dr. Owens that she wants Will transferred to a real hospital, he tells her that's not a possibility, and that's when Joyce finally asks the question we've all been wondering.
Can anyone tell me what's wrong with him? Can a single person in this room tell me what is wrong with my boy?
Yeah, no one seems to have any answers. Dr. Owens then goes to grab Hopper and gives him a suit and takes Hopper down to the lab because they want to show him something. They take Hopper down in the elevator to basically see the upside down and that it's all spreading. And Dr. Owens is talking about how, the living organism or this upside down is starting to build up a defense mechanism to survive, which sort of echoes what we actually heard Mr. Clark, the teacher, say back in episode 4.
All living things, from complex mammals to single-celled organisms, instinctively respond to danger. Expose a bacterium to a toxic chemical, and it will flee, or deploy some other defense mechanism.
All living organisms develop defense mechanisms against attack. They adapt. They find some way to survive.
When Hopper asks why they aren't burning it, Dr. Owens says there's a complication, and that complication is in fact Will. By this time, Joyce has now filled Bob in on what really happened to Will, and poor Will, he actually wakes up and doesn't remember Bob. Also doesn't remember Hopper or what happened the night before. He does seem to remember Mike, though. There is a tiny bit he does remember from the night before, and that is the soldiers hurting him and how they shouldn't have done that because it upset the shadow monster. Now, to test Dr. Owens' theory about Will and the upside-down tentacles vines being connected, they bring one in and burn it, and Will feels that pain. Dr. Owens tells Joyce that it's got to be some kind of virus causing a neurological disorder, and it's communicating, and it has some kind of hive intelligence, and it's connected to all the hosts, and that just sounds really scary. Will's brain also seems to be getting worse, and the scientists basically say, screw him, if he dies when we burn the upside down, that's just what's going to happen, and Dr. Owens disagrees. He has a plan that he wants to try first, so he lays out all the Polaroids of the map that Will drew on a table, and Will points to a spot, and he says that is it. Like, he doesn't know what that spot is or why, but the shadow monster doesn't want him to see it. Dr. Owens then sends a handful of men into the upside down to the point where Will said, and Hopper immediately identifies it as the graveyard that he almost died in, which starts to send red flags. So remember when Dart and all the little baby Demogorgons decided to leave Steve and the kids alone and they went somewhere to find a better snack? Well, that's where they found it. They were all called to that spot in the upside down, and yep, it ended up being a trap which Mike actually figured out and tried to warn them against, but he couldn't get through to them. And those little Demogorgons end up killing all the men down there. So on the radars now, they see that all those red dots, which are the Demogorgons, are moving, and they're all moving in a direction. And as Will starts to tell his mom that they should really get out of there, surprise, yeah, now stuff is really starting to get good. Like, we really got to focus on sort of two main storylines here with Nancy and Jonathan, and then Will and the Demogorgons, and it didn't seem as cluttered. Like, I love Eleven and I like her storyline, I think it's interesting, but sometimes there's just too much happening in an episode. So now we know that this threat is really real. Like, there's a whole army of Demogorgons making their way into Hawkins' lab. Granted, there's still like a wall or a door of glass separating, Hopper and Owens from these Demogorgons, but I have a feeling those guys can get through that glass pretty quickly. I've got a lot of questions, but before I go to get those answers in the next episode, it's time to relive some of my favorite lines and moments from this one.
How do you know?
How do I know if it's not a lizard?
Yeah, how do you know if it's not just a lizard?
Because his face opened up and he ate my cat.
It is a curse to see so clearly.
If I were you, I'd just cut the bullshit and share the damn bed.
Stay out of my room.
Then tell your little nerdy friend to shut his mouth. Code red, Lucas, code red. Code red. Bunch of nerds.
Man, I always thought stuff like this happened in movies and comic books.
Jonathan, how was the pullout?
Sorry?
The sofa.
Mormons?
Mormons.
talkative ones.
I mean, why would a girl like some nasty slug anyway?
An interdimensional slug because it's awesome. Farrah Fawcett spray.
Yeah, Farrah Fawcett. You tell anyone I just told you that, and your ass is grass, you're dead, Henderson. You understand?
Yep.
Well, that wraps up my 6th recap for Stranger Things, and now it's time to go watch episode 7. So without spoiling what's ahead for me, leave your comments and theories about this specific episode down below, and then click right over here for the rest of my recaps. I'm now off to watch episode 7, and I will see you very, very soon.